So we move into chapter 14, index numbers. Now, I quite like this chapter because I think it's fairly straightforward, and the questions that we'll see within the OT section generally tend to follow a very straightforward pattern. Let me open this up and tell you exactly what I mean. So let's start with single item index numbers. Now, exactly what do we mean by an index? Well, we mean some sort of measure or metric to compare values over time between 2024 and 2021 as an example. Okay, so if we were to take, let's say, a simple price index, okay, then what we'd be looking at is clearly, well, we have a price at time one, let's say 2024, and we have a price at time zero, let's say 2020. And all that we're looking to do is, I guess, sort of uplift or understand the relationship between the prices at the base year T0 and indeed the prices at time one. So the key point here outside of what I've just said is that most indexes are base 100, meaning that the base year is given a value of 100. This makes it much easier to see the changes because you're looking at obviously the difference between, let's say, 100 and 115, 120, etc. So, think about the RPI, or the Retail Price Index, just as an example. Moving on from there, if we think about a weighted index, it's slightly different but not overly complicated. In terms of the definition, really what we're talking about is considering multiple items or multiple variables. So, RPI and indeed an inflation rate would be a typical example of that. It's currently or very frequently measured with baskets or, a sort of an index based on several sort of what you might call go-to products, milk, fish, eggs, petrol, etc., etc., etc. Okay? So that would be a weighted index, and it is weighted across several different variables. So let's note here that certainly these indices or indexes, they do enable meaningful comparisons between figures from different years, removing the impact of price movements. We know that a common problem, particularly in a number of different countries, is inflation. Look at Turkey as an example, or even deflation. So really, the questions are going to be hinged upon the prices of given items in different years, and we just need to know how to manipulate the formula. I mean, generally speaking, if we're talking about inflation, we're talking about going from, let's say, a lower figure 3 years ago to a higher figure now. So really, the fraction is going to be top heavy, isn't it? It's going to have the higher figure on top, lower figure on the bottom. Again, you'll see what I mean when we get into the meaty sort of objective test questions. Again, I don't think this is really, really difficult. I think the questions are fairly straightforward. Now, a couple of key sort of add-ons, these two indices, Lasperi and Pasch. In terms of the definitions, really we're talking about just two types of weighted indices, weighted aggregate indices with their own sort of calculations, if you will, okay, or their own formulas, and these will be given in the exam. Note that the Lasperi quantity index uses prices from the base year as the weights, okay? Let's make a note of that. Be careful, because if you're going to make a mistake in questions like this, and I've seen it many, many times, I don't think there's too much of a need to it. What you're going to do is confuse this area of prices versus weights versus quantity. Note that the Pasch price index uses quantities from the current period as weights, okay? So just be careful. Look at the formulas, look at the difference in the formulas, and indeed work the questions. I don't think that really we should be getting questions in these areas wrong. Obviously, I'm not under pressure in the exam under stress, but for me, these are very much go-to questions. These are questions that when we see them in the exam, we should feel pretty good, because they think, well, wheel out the formula, even if I don't fully understand it, and just cut the information from the question into the formula. More often than not, you'll be in the right place. Okay? So that's probably the shortest chapter, certainly, that we have to deal with. I hope that made sense. I think the whole area will make much more sense with question practice, obviously. I hope that your studies are going well. Keep on pushing. Many thanks for listening.